Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and welcome again back to the show. Today's topic is based on the comic actress writer Sarah Silverman, who, in a recent podcast that she runs, talked about Hollywood's casting of non-Jewish actors in Jewish roles, and it's called what Randall said. You called it the Jewface problem.
The Jewface, yeah.
Yeah, I remember it was your idea. It said, let's do the Jewface problem. I'm like, huh? But
Well, I want to say, could I just say, like, the reason I was so, I thought this was so interesting is because I watched the Amazon Prime series Transparent, which is really, it's a show about a Jewish family living in Los Angeles and their experience. And it's very Jewish, shall we say. It's, them being a Jewish family is an important point of the show. And I found out through Sarah Silverman that the entire family, except for the father, except for Jeffrey Tambor, is not Jewish. They're played by actors who are not Jewish. And it's like 4 kids. And then there's a rabbi who one of the kids dates, a female rabbi, and she's not Jewish either. That's That actress is like
Catherine Hahn.
Catherine Hahn, who plays Jews a lot.
Just been cast as Joan Rivers. So we're going to get into all that, plus the Time Magazine article that followed up on Sarah Silverman, plus Sarah Silverman's follow-up to Time Magazine in just a moment. But as always, please like, subscribe, share, comment. We want to know what you're thinking. Randall, what's a good way to reach us?
Well, just go to our website, chrisandrandall.com, and also you can check out our Facebook page, leave a comment. Yeah,
and we definitely, this is something we really do want to hear. Full disclosure, even though I'm named after St. Christopher, I'm Jewish. I'm the child of 2 Jewish parents. I'm what's called a secular Jew. So today we are going to talk about something that's a little bit triggering, and I can understand. We're going to have a lot of questions and answers. And I just want to be clear, since Randall isn't Jewish, even though Randall came with this curiosity to the question, a lot of the questions that Randall will ask today are questions that I've actually written. So please don't think that Randall is being in any way, shape, or form culturally insensitive when he asks me these questions. These are the questions I wanted him to ask me so I could give you my perspective on what Sarah Silverman is trying to say and whether or not what she's saying is something I agree with. No Jewish person can be a spokesman for all Jews. She can't, nor can I. But at least she shares her truth, and I will do my best to share my truth. And I want to know what you think, Randall. And it doesn't matter to me that you're not Jewish. I think that what you have to say on this is as valid and to me just as fascinating. So yes, just to go recap, Sarah Silverman says that Hollywood has a Jewface problem when it comes to casting because there's movies coming out and TV shows coming out about famous Jewish people such as Joan Rivers, that's going to be played by Catherine Hahn, who is not Jewish. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was played by an actress who is not Jewish. There's a TV show about a Jewish stand-up comic, kind of similar to the early Joan Rivers, also played by a non-Jew, and that this is an issue what they call representation. And her assertion is that Hollywood has an issue with representation. That we all agree with, but it rarely talks about why it has an issue with Jewish representation. And that's what we're going to kind of look at what she's saying and evaluate. So, Randall.
Yeah, well, I think that, what do you think Jewface is, first of all?
All right, well, that's a great term. So when you first said it, I got to admit, I got triggered.
Why? What do you mean?
I got triggered. I'm like, oh my God, that's horrible. I'd never heard about it before. But then I looked it up, and it's a real thing. And Jewface traditionally is when a Gentile actor plays a Jewish character with exaggerated Semitic features, or as I like to say, demonic features. Last Christmas, we did a whole thing on Scrooge in A Christmas Carol and how, in many ways, he was like a proto-Jew because Dickens got issues with anti-Semitism. And, he's not a big fan of Christianity and Christmas. But the way that he is normally shown in illustrations back in the 19th century was very much the way Jews, with a beak nose and a pointy chin and a flat forehead. To me, I always felt like Jewface isn't really just exaggerated Semitic features, but almost like, big ears, pointy nose, like however you can make us look like a demon. Now, she's really talking about modern Jewface, and she said one could say that Jewishness, even when you no longer use these very overtly anti-Semitic manners, but when you just simply have Jewishness be something that a non-Jewish actor can just wear like a coat, that is a level of subtle racism. So that's what modern Jewface is.
Right. So, I mean, hypothetically, you could argue that Jewface is, in terms of the physicality, like you just said, it's like you're exaggerating features that Jews supposedly have. But the weird thing about this concept is, like you said, it's more akin to a demon than it is actual Jews. Like, like I don't think any of these features are endemic to Jews in general. Like it's
right.
It's
To be very clear, I don't think that's the quality of Jewface that she's addressing, because that doesn't exist anymore. That's socially unacceptable.
It is weird, though. I think that those features are associated with Jews when I don't think there's any basis in reality that Jews have any of those features.
But contemporary Jewface is more the idea that Jews have a way of speaking. The Jews have a particular hair color. Jews have a particular facial structure. That Jews all kind of look and sound the same, and that is what she means by Jewface. That there is just a stereotypical Jew.
There's a stereotypical Jewish look, right? That's what you mean, right?
And sound and sensibility.
And I don't think that's true either, Chris. Do you think that's true?
Well, no, it isn't true, but she's arguing, we'll go a little bit deeper in a moment, on that when you Gentiles play Jews, the way that they make a road into playing Jewish is from the outside in. And anytime you do the outside in, you can be accused of wearing a mask. And,
just to further talk about the Jewish look, so to speak, there are a number of Jewish actors, which we'll get to, right, Chris, that they're Jewish, but they never play Jews because they don't look like the stereotypical Jew.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all of those questions.
All right, so Sarah Silverman, she talks about representation, right? So I'll just say, I think when she's talking about representation, she means two different things. She means Jewish actors getting the chance to play these parts, and also just the authenticity that would come with an actual Jewish person playing a Jewish role. I mean, what do you think she means, Chris?
Oh yeah, no, I think you nailed it at M1. I mean, generically speaking, because we're talking a lot these days about representation in film and in television, what it means is how a community is either representative, either on an individual scale or on a group level, or possibly both. So yeah, how are Jews represented as individuals, as a community, or both? And specifically here, you could make an argument it might be slightly different for women than it is for men. I think that representation for Jewish men is not great, but representation for Jewish women, especially in leading parts, is far worse.
Okay, so we talked about a little bit about the look, but you might want to expand on that. But what do you think modern Jewface has come to look like, Chris?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Especially in a show like Transparent.
So, representation, as you say, is about authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. So authenticity is to show us what any marginalized group of people really look like in a way that is true to that culture, to that heritage, to whatever it is that makes up that community. It could be their sexual orientation, it could be the way they relate to gender. It doesn't matter. So in this case, modern Jewface is really built around the Ashkenazi Jew. The Ashkenazi Jews are European Jews, as opposed to Sephardic Jews who come from the Middle East. There's all we're all over the world. You can
You're
find us
you're 100% Ashkenazi Jew.
in
That's right, Chris?
Africa. I am an Ashkenazi Jew. So Ashkenazi features normally are the stereotypical ones we associate. Uh, and as Silverman says, and she's right, like a Jewish woman will rarely play the reed, but she'll play the sassy best friend, the shrewish ex-girlfriend, the book agent, or as she likes to say, cunty bitches, whom, and then even among Jewish men, you'll see us as like a lawyer, a doctor, but it's like hello, like it's a very New Yorky, very accentuated. Either they come across as like they're working class people from the outer boroughs or New Jersey, or they're nouveau riche people or affluent, but it's always with a particular dialect, Randall, and oi, and they'll drop Yiddishisms, and and they're always they're not athletic, they're brainy, they're neurotic. It's a very it's just one slice of a very large pie. Even when it's done accurately, it's still one slice of a very large pie. So,
well, there's an emphasis when you say on like an outsider status, on being an other, being
yeah,
different than the
and I
mainstream.
guess one of the things about Jewface that is an issue is so, and this I think is true for a lot of marginalized communities. There's this concept we use in the Jewish community called too Jewish. And it can mean that joke is too Jewish, that story is too Jewish, but it can also mean that person looks too Jewish.
What does that mean?
Well, like a lot of marginalized people, part of the Jewish culture has a lot of self-hate. So sometimes it's that Jews themselves would prefer to see themselves as idealized Christians, and they want to assimilate so badly they want to eradicate what makes them Jewish. Or it could be Gentiles feel who are in the casting process who are not Jews that if we get that somehow Semitic features are just not as attractive as non-Semitic features, and no one can be that attractive. So why Hollywood cast non-Jewish actresses that to play Jewish leads is because sometimes they can control the level of Semiticness that they project, and that's kind of like really I think where it's at. So that's in a strange way almost the opposite of Jewish face, but it's just as pernicious because it promulgates the idea that defined Jewish features are less attractive and can only be appreciated in small doses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, you said something interesting earlier. Let me ask you a question about it. Do you believe Ashkenazi Jews have like a look? Do you believe there is a physical similarity with Ashkenazi Jews, or there are Ashkenazi Jewish features?
Yeah,
Do you
of
believe
course,
that's true?
because but they're Eastern European features. You know what I'm saying? I mean, yeah, obviously so. People who are all from Eastern Europe and Central Europe are going to have physical features that are similar.
But I wouldn't say that the Jews from that region are different physically than the other people from that region. I mean, would you say?
No, not at all. They're not different at all. And there's variety. Everyone assumes that Jews only have dark hair. Some Jews have blonde hair. My mom has blue eyes. My grandmother had blue eyes. So,
And they're 100% Ashkenazi.
the 100% Ashkenazi to whatever that means. I mean, Jews who are Ashkenazis are by nature not, I would argue, 100% Jewish because, we've been around for about 800, 900 years. There, certainly have been non-Jewish people in our bloodline, which maybe accounts for variety. But Judaism is weird because we're a culture, an ethnicity, and a religion. So you don't even have to be born Jewish or of Jewish parentage to be a practicing Jew. I know that makes it really confusing. And I feel like in a strange way, I'm probably making it harder to answer your question.
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I mean, yeah, it's confusing for people what exactly it means to be Jewish, but I think in a lot of ways, there's not a lot of borders when it comes to being Jewish, and I think that some of the stereotypes you see in Hollywood are their constructions. I mean, am I crazy to say that, Chris?
No, you're absolutely right. I think you're again. I think Randall, everything you've been saying has just been spot on. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's a question for you. Do you think Jews are really a minority because they're white and successful? You asked me to ask you that, Chris.
And I did make, by the way, I wrote that question, so that's what I'm saying. Like, I literally, it's like Randall never was going to say that. That's me writing for Randall. So please, folks, don't say, oh, that Randall, he's such an anti-Semite. No. So,
can I say something about that question, Chris?
Yes, please.
I've known many Jewish people in my life, and I wouldn't say all Jews are like financially successful. I mean, I think there's Jews at all sorts of different.
Of course not. And again, thank you for being a good sport, Randall. Sometimes I feel like I'm writing, a play, and I'm deliberately casting you as the villain. So I'm so sorry. But the point is this, and this goes back to what Sarah Silverman is saying, which is that representation is to help marginalized people get an equal footing with those groups that are really what you'd call the dominant groups in our society, the groups that we know well, whose culture is always well represented and we get. And because it's just generally easier to see other groups as underrepresented and marginalized because you can look at other elements like, for example, skin color, class, ethnicity, what have you. But, from a distance, you look at me, you don't know my religion, you don't know my background, and you just say, hey, here's just another white guy. And while it's true that, Jews, much like many other ethnic groups, have done well in academic and socioeconomic pursuits, it's still just one element of all Jews. And it doesn't need to be held against them. We're still a minority. People really don't understand us, and we're not being represented properly. I mean, yeah.
Well, when casting Jewish characters, is it appropriate to go with colorblind casting? Should actors be able to play anyone?
Yeah, and this is a great question. And Silverman acknowledges that, what's her name? Han. What is her first name?
Catherine?
Catherine Hahn is talented. And, she'll be a great Joan Rivers. And I would say, in general, as someone you've taken acting, I've done acting, yeah, an actor's toolbox. No, an actor should. Not just, absolutely. In order to be a good actor, an actor should know how to play everything that isn't them. They should really understand how to be that. So, yeah, actors should absolutely, and colorblind casting is wonderful. I'm all for that too. However, this is what I'm trying to say here is that, there are so many talented people in all of the marginalized groups. There's such a vast array of really talented actors and actresses in every underrepresented groups who often can't get cast because they read as being too much of their own religion or ethnicity or orientation, that it limits sometimes what they get cast for. That preference really should be given to Jews playing Jews because in fairness, a lot of times some very good actors who are Jewish can't get cast as a Gentile because they read too Jewish.
Well, what about the authenticity problem? I mean, if a non-Jewish actor plays a Jewish character, it's like, where's the kernel of truth in their performance?
Yeah, I do think that Jewishness can be learned. I think a good actor can spend time, can get to know Jews, can observe them, can be really appreciative of the culture. I think most people who become actors are fairly liberal, socially progressive people, but they're coming from a place of reverence. And, the worst version of this would be to see Jewishness as a coat, something you just put on. I'm not saying this is true for every actor who plays a Jew at all, but one of the things I You remember the movie Shine that came out in the
Yes.
90s?
Yes.
So, interesting film. It's about a real pianist composer named David Helfgott who suffered from mental illness. And the movie is split into two parts, one where he's a young man, and the other one when he's played by an older man. Jeffrey Rush plays the older man, and the younger man is played by Noah Taylor. Neither of them are Jewish in real life. And I guess Noah Taylor has played a lot of Jews. And during an interview in 1999, someone had asked him, like, why do you play Jew? You're not Jewish, but people think you are. And he replied, actually, people often assume that I'm Jewish. I'm not, but there's just that odd Jewish thing in me. There's just that odd Jewish thing in me. And I'm not calling him out as an anti-Semite. I'm just saying the otherness of Jews, that's a ridiculously insensitive thing to say, and it shows a certain blindness towards Judaism when you think of it as the odd Jewish thing.
Well, what do you think he means by that? Do you think he means that he just doesn't look quite white or something, or what is that what he means, or is it just physical?
It means that his understanding of Judaism is still pretty underdeveloped for someone who just played a Jew. That's really what it means to me. What it means to me is that he sees this as some sort of element or aspect, but in a way that, I just read that way, which reduces Jewishness to a series of hair color, facial mannerisms, and tics, or sensibility. It's not inherently racist. It's more subtly, subconsciously ignorant.
That almost is a perfect description of Hollywood's attitude towards Jewish characters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you think Jewish actors play Italian Catholics a lot? What do you think about that?
Yeah, and you raise a good point. I mean, Jews can play and have played all sorts of Christians, but for whatever reason, Jews often get cast as Italians. And just because my name is Chris, I got to tell you, most people who don't know that I'm Jewish always assume that I'm Italian. I read it. It's just an odd Italian Catholic thing in me, to paraphrase Noah Taylor. So, yeah, Jews do play Italian Catholics. Italian Catholics are often the go-to to play Jews. I mean, you look at a TV show like Everybody Loves Raymond, and Peter Boyle, Jewish. Doris Roberts, Jewish. Brad Garrett, Jewish. Three Jewish actors playing the father, the mother, and the brother of Ray Romano. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. But this does go back to my point, which is that there are lots of opportunities for Christian actors to play Christians. There may not be as many opportunities for Italians to play Italian Americans, but certainly they are more than 1.5% of the population, and they can, certainly as Catholics, they're a larger part of America's community, so they have more options. So why I would say, and this is the thing I feel about, I'll make this side argument by example. I saw a production years ago of Othello, where not only was the actor who played Othello African American, but the actor who played Iago was African American. And I was perfectly comfortable with that because in that scenario, it's fine for underrepresented people to play non-traditional parts because it allows us to see what they bring to it. It really comes down to, on some level, when you're dealing with representation, just providing opportunities. So, yeah, I think in general, Italian Catholics have had plenty of opportunities to play Italians, to play Catholics, to play Irish Catholics, or to just play Christians in general. So I know that sounds inherently unfair, but the argument I'm making is really people who don't have a lot of opportunities deserve more opportunities, and people who have a lot of opportunities, they don't need as many. Okay. And I'll look at this from a Jewish perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You were going to say?
Oh, I was just going to ask you another question. Why do you think Jews? Okay, so we know that in Hollywood, there's a lot of Jews who work in Hollywood. Okay.
Oh yeah,
We both agree.
writers, casters, producers, directors,
And this is,
representation behind the camera.
and by the way, I want to say that this is
Perfect.
because I just want to say that this is because when the industry started back in like 1900, there were a lot of Jewish immigrants who came to America, and Hollywood was a burgeoning nascent industry that establishment people weren't interested in. And so you had a lot of Jews in those days go into
Jews founded
movie
Hollywood.
theaters.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of immigrant groups that were involved in early Hollywood, but the Jews especially like took to it, and they founded all the major studios, and that shall we say that nepotistic legacy continued till today. So that's why there's so many Jews in Hollywood. So it's not anything shall we say evil, right? Nothing malicious. It's just an accident of history, I would say.
Well, I mean, it's not an accident of history. I mean, the arts have always been considered a place that's slightly disreputable. Jews at the beginning of the 20th century had a harder time of going into the established professions like law, politics, medicine. There were literal restrictions on schools to train Jews and companies that would hire Jews, but no one wanted to go into film at the time because it was considered lurid, just like theater.
And most of the film they catered to immigrants. Like early cinema was the audience was mostly immigrants that didn't even speak English. A lot.
I guess that's interesting to say that. I know that certainly once Hollywood starts reaching the beginning of the golden age, which is right around World War I, right to the Roaring '20s, everybody in America is going to the movies.
Right. That's by the 20s, 30s, 40s, Hollywood becomes mainstream. But before it's
Hollywood,
mainstream.
that is run by the Warners, by the mayors, by all these very prominent first generation or immigrant Jews. They're some of the wealthiest Jewish people in America and some of the most influential Jewish people in America. And I think historically, at that period in history, there was a lot of fear. I think that Jews in general, I feel, and I think we get very nervous whenever we get too much of the spotlight on us, especially in that particular period of history where anti-Semitism wasn't even a bad thing. That was just the law. There were just places in America where Jews could openly be discriminated against. So, yeah, I think that, you think of the early Hollywood actors who had their names changed, like Kirk Douglas, so that they could sound more Gentile, and I do think there was a lot of fear of being seen as too Jewish, not just in an ugly sense, but in a fear that, people would stop going to the movies if they knew a leading man was Jewish, or people would see Hollywood as being even more anti-Christian and immoral if they were aware of the Jewish sensibility. And so I think that's early Hollywood. And even though today we don't have those same fears, I still think there's still a fear from the producer's angle. I think there's three different things going on, right? So I think from a producer's angle, I think there's a fear that if an actor reads as too Jewish, he won't play well in the Midwest or the South. She won't play well in Peoria because the majority of America is Christian, and something that comes off as too too Jewish will alienate Christians. That's the first fear. Then there's the next fear, which is, that's the first fear. And then I think from an actor's perspective, I think we have a number of prominent actors who just happen to be Jewish, but they don't like to play Jews because they're afraid that once they do, they'll never play a leading lady again. You saw Schindler's List, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So in that movie, the most prominent Jew is played by Ben Kingsley.
Okay.
Who's not Jewish, by the way.
Right.
And has had a wonderful career playing everything under the sun. He's great. But Rachel Weisz, do you remember her?
Mm-hmm.
It's her debut. Rachel Weisz, English actress, plays a Polish Jew. beautiful. She ends up, her character as becomes a romantic, unfortunately, in a bad way, prisoner of the Nazi guard, the Nazi who's running the camp, played by Ray Fiennes. Anyway, if you look at her career, she's an attractive woman. She's a very strong actress, but she rarely gets to play leading ladies for the very reason that I think that she got so branded as a Jew by playing a Jew that it limited what she could go out for.
You believe that's true?
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
that's a real fear that a lot of the more prominent Jewish actors have.
All right. Let me ask you: how does this affect the way Jewish audiences see themselves? This stereotyping of Jewish characters in Hollywood.
Well, it's a good question because, like, I'll just say this much. I'm going to name a couple actors who are Jewish, and you wouldn't even know they're Jewish. Did you know that Daniel Radcliffe is Jewish?
I don't think I knew that.
And Harry Potter, Scarlett Johansson, Mila Kunis, Helena Bonham Carter, Mike Douglas, Jeff Bridges, Jake Gyllenhaal, Joaquin Phoenix, Sean Penn, Jennifer Connelly, Gwyneth Paltrow, Arnold, Andrew Garfield. I just saw Andrew Garfield play Jim Baker. Okay. I had no idea. I mean, the fact that, my grandmother used to watch old movies on TV with me, and she'd point out to somebody like Lauren Bacall and said, she's really Jewish. I mean, it's like, it's like old Hollywood is just full of what we would call, the undercover Jew. And then at the same time,
it's ironic because go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's ironic because there's a number of actors who are Jewish and they never play Jews because they don't fit into Hollywood's Jewish stereotype. And then there's a number of actors who always play Jews who aren't Jewish because they fit into the Hollywood Jewish stereotype. And it's just
absolutely right.
It's an irony.
It's like there were Jewish actors who did play Jewish stereotypes back in the day, like Selma Diamond, Thelma Ritter, Zero Mostel, Phil Silvers. I don't think you would know any of those people today, but in the old Hollywood era, they were always side characters. They were sassy. They were neurotic. They might say something in Yiddish. And that's what a Jew looked like on film. Did you ever watch Night Court?
Yes.
So before the character of Roz was on the show, there was a different bailiff, and she was played by Selma Diamond. And she had like a thick, New York accent, and she spoke like she smoked 10 packs of cigarettes, and she'd say sassy stuff. Yeah, that's Selma Diamond. She made a living playing a particular kind of Jewish woman who certainly does exist, but is too much of what we think of when we think of Jewish actors.
Well, Chris, that so just let me ask you. So Selma Diamond in Night Court. That character she's playing, would you say that's a stereotypically Hollywood Jewish character?
Absolutely. And that's an actress who's made a living doing it.
Okay. See, I didn't know that as a kid growing up. I watched it, it's like, I didn't know anything about this stuff, so, okay, it's interesting to know.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because like the Safadi brothers, who I think are some of the best movie makers, writer-directors about the Jewish experience, who, to their credit, cast Daniel Radcliffe as a Jew because he's a Jew. So much props to them. No, that's not right. They didn't cast Daniel Radcliffe. He's not Jewish, so I totally am wrong.
Are you talking about Adam Sandler?
No, the one from Twilight who plays a vampire.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
First movie they did, they cast him. Anyway, but Uncut Gems is great because, Adam Sandler is just playing a real Jewish guy who is not every Jew, but a particular Jew who sells diamonds in New York City, who's middle class, but who's got a wife who's Jewish, played by Adina Menzel, who's Jewish. And, his dad is played by Judd Hirsch, who is Jewish. And, it's Jews with Jews. But Eric Bogosian plays the older stepbrother who is the closest thing we have to a heavy for the most part. He is the one who's kind of corrupt, who is threatening and menacing. Now, I love Eric Bogosian. Eric Bogosian, I met him, sweetest man ever. Eric Bogosian is one of those actors like Anne Devere Smith who can literally play every human being in the world. Old men, young ladies, British, anything. He is just a chameleon, and he is superb and scary. And I've playing a Jew, and in fairness, he's an Armenian actor. And as bad as it is for representation for our Jews in Hollywood, I have never seen an Armenian character ever in Hollywood. So part of me is like, dude, give the Armenian actor a chance to play a Jew. It's okay. They don't get a lot of, and in that sense, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you if that's the argument you would have made, but I just think that role would have been different if it had been played by a Jewish actor like Liev Schreiber, who's very threatening, Corey Stoll, who's very threatening, or if they wanted to go older, then Sean Penn, who I think would have been great as the older brother-in-law. Yeah, as you said before, with Transparent, right? I've met Jill Soloway. She's Jewish. She is not just Jewish, but she belongs to several marginalized communities. I agree with you. Right? You were watching Transparent. You thought they were all Jewish, didn't you?
Yeah, so there's 4 kids, I think it is, in the family, and then there's like a rabbi character, and none of them are Jewish.
Yeah, and that I can't answer why. Like,
none of the actors are Jewish, but the characters are supposed to be Jewish.
The actors are Jewish. And the opposite of that is a show called Mad About You, which was very popular in the 90s, where Paul Reiser plays Paul Buckman, and Helen Hunt plays his wife, Jamie Buckman, and Paul Reiser has dark hair and traditionally Semitic features. There's nothing negative on that. And, Jamie Buckman has blonde hair and blue eyes, and Carol O'Connor, and I forgot the other actors, but they play her off as a Christian. And this is something even that Sarah Silverman had mentioned, which is, why is it that you never, ever see a TV show where a Jewish man is allowed to be married to a Jewish woman? And I got nothing wrong with interfaith relationships. I'm in one. So totally okay. Don't get me wrong. They're fine. But it is weird, that you can't do that. And originally Terry Hatcher was going to be cast as Jamie Buckman. But I remember meeting the co-creator of Mad About You, and he was like, he really wanted Helen Hunt because, and it's an interesting thought. I mean, what would have it looked like if you had a brunette-haired woman playing a brunette-haired man's wife, right? Everyone would have to assume that she's Jewish because dark hair, right? Even though she is definitely not Jewish, she reads more Jewish than Helen Hunt. Well, Helen Hunt's grandmother is Jewish in real life. So actually, the hysterical thing is that she's really Jewish. She's a Jew who was cast for not looking like a Jew, so she could play a Gentile to make a Jewish relationship more palatable to either Gentiles or to assuage the fears of Jews who are putting together this show. I'll give you one last one to answer your question, and I really do think this one answers it the best. And I hate doing this, but I think this really answers your question. So, 40 years ago, there was a movie called Chapter 2, written by Woody Allen. Based on a play by Neil Simon. And the screenplay is written by Neil Simon. I forgot. I think Herb Ross directed it. Anyway, in real life, Neil Simon lost his first wife to cancer. He went through a very difficult period of his life, and then he found a new woman. He fell in love. That one was Marsha Mason, and he wrote a play about coming to terms with losing your first wife and being available to be in love with someone new. And he made the movie, and he cast Marsha Mason in the Marsha Mason role, which is great. Makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. And then he cast James Caan in the Neil Simon role. And I remember my mom thinking how ridiculous it was that Neil Simon would think that James Caan is a double for him. Now, we had this discussion yesterday, so I apologize. There's no surprise for you. But,
it's just really sad that your mother didn't think that James Caan was, one, Jewish, and number two, that Neil Simon could be a large, hulking kind of guy, which he is actually, because you've seen him
Yeah,
in real
right.
life, right?
I saw him in real life. So, that's the point. James, my mom saw James Caan as this sunny Corleone, this very muscular, tall, heavy sexy dude in The Godfather and other things. Always a Gentile, always very physical. And she saw Neil Simon as this skinny little intellectual guy. And in real life, James Caan is 5'9", nothing wrong with that. And in real life, Neil Simon is 6'1" and was built like a linebacker. Now, James Caan was a boxer, so I'm not saying James Caan wasn't physical, but Neil Simon played football. They were both. But the thing is that Neil Simon, very few people ever saw what he looked like outside of the photo of his face. So we superimposed Woody Allen onto Neil Simon because Woody Allen then becomes the prototypical Jew. So what's really sad about all this is that even Jews can't conceive of what Jews look like.
Your mother has completely internalized the Hollywood Jewish stereotype.
Right. And not to shit on my mom, but hey, she also named me after a Roman Catholic saint. So, and in fairness to my mom, she grew up in an era where there was anti-Semitism. So Jews did have to often mask their Jewishness if they wanted to just get around in real life. So let's look at it from an acting perspective.
Yeah, why should Jews play Jews?
Yeah. Well, a Jewish actor, as you've said before, provides what you call authenticity, right? That shared cultural experience. And they can kind of gauge the level of how much or how little the character's relationship to Judaism does and doesn't shape the role they play. Whereas a Gentile actor, I feel, risks either being too reverential or too indifferent to the aspect of Jewish identity. And we, for those of you who are watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, at the bottom, one of the things we're going to have is a clip from, I think it must have been in the early 80s, in England. One of the most problematic characters to ever play, who's Jewish, is Shylock from The Merchant of Venice. You're right. He's the villain in The Merchant of Venice, isn't he, Randall?
Mm-hmm, that's right.
Shylock the moneylender, right? Like, that's a very problematic character. So in this 10-minute clip that I was able to find, a director who has worked with both David Suchet, you might know this actor from Perot, and Patrick Stewart, who you might know from X-Men and Star Trek, or Picard, two trained English actors of the stage, discuss their different approaches to Shylock. And I've seen Patrick Stewart on stage. He's a brilliant stage actor. I've not seen David Suchet, but the director who's interviewing them asked them quite literally, how do you deal with the anti-Semitic elements of the play? And, I think both of them come to that same conclusion that Shakespeare's not anti-Semitic. Shylock is not an anti-Semitic character. There is a humanity. And then you get into like, well, how do you play? How do you approach the role? And you remember what Patrick Stewart said? He says, when he looks at Shylock, he doesn't want to make him too Jewish. He thinks of, this is great to hear Patrick Stewart saying this, an alien, an outsider that happens to be Jewish. So when he approaches Shylock, he thinks money is very important to him. So he wears very dirty clothing because why waste your money on clothes? But on the opposite, he avoids all Jewface. Nothing, he doesn't have his hair or nose or facial features altered. He wants to use himself as he looks to play Shylock so the people in the audience can relate to the universality. He doesn't want to give him a Jewish accent. He actually has him give an English accent, a class accent that's even classier than the average English person because he wants to show how hard he's trying to be assimilated. So what do you think in the abstract about that approach, Randall?
Well, just my gut tells me that it's like the wrong move. Shylock should be as similar to the people around him as possible. I mean, that's a mistake. That's the mistake that Hollywood makes. You know, they try to take Jewish characters and they make them an outsider. They try to emphasize their outsiderness. You know, when we're all living right here together. You know,
Well, I mean,
it's almost
honestly,
silly.
to me, I actually think that's a very kind way of doing it, and I
It
love
is
that.
though.
You
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
like that. It totally not offends me. I actually have to admit, if Patrick Stewart, who's a great interpreter of Shakespeare, does Shylock that way, I think that's the best choice that Patrick Stewart can make. But
Well, it would be
it's
ridiculous
just-
to put on the prosthetics like some
Right.
actors in the past have. I
whereas,
mean,
right, so David Suchet, who is Jewish, does the difference. So Stewart says, uh, Stewart thinks of Shylock as an outsider that happens to be a Jew. And Suchet counters the opposite, that he is an outsider because he is a Jew, not happens to be a Jew, but the very fact that he is a Jew is why he is an outsider. And Suchet says that the Jewish element is unavoidably important. Shakespeare never lets you forget the word Jew is used towards Shylock 22 times. So what he does is supposed to stress that is for him, he wears very wealthy clothes. Instead of money, he over accentuates the form. I'm sorry. So for Patrick Stewart, what he stresses important is that money matters to him, and that he is cultured and he can assimilate on his voice. Whereas Suchet believes the voice needs to be even more foreign, even more different, and that Shylock is proud of his Jewishness, and he wants everybody to know it. And he wears expensive clothing because he sees himself as a man of high status, and he's willing to exploit his Judaism if it is necessary. To which Stewart replies, "Isn't that dangerous?" And Suchet says, "No, that's human behavior." And that's the difference in a nutshell, right? Like, part of an actor's job is to show you all the colors of humanity, including a Jewish character using his Judaism to get what he wants in a scene.
well, it gets to the authenticity problem with non-Jews playing Jews. You know, Suchet can be way more authentic. He doesn't have to worry about being
He doesn't have to be
anti-Semitic.
deferential or reverential to Jews. Now, I hate
Right.
to use this word, and it isn't really to do with Jews, but something we've talked about is the magical Negro.
Yeah. Yeah, so you make a character. There's a lot of Hollywood movies. You know, it's been criticized over and over. You make a character who is like, it's played by a black person, but they're a character. It's a character that has superpowers and is perfect and is practically a god, right?
Yeah.
And it's a lazy kind of casting and writing because you don't want to make. They're trying to give a part to a black actor, a black character, but the character is not a real person. It's just a plot device.
Right. And that's kind of what the downside of contemporary Jewface is. I mean, most people who are actors, they're handicapped to how far they can go because they have to know that, look, part of being a Jew isn't just being a good, smart, wonderful, loving person. It might also be that there's a certain kind of vindictiveness that is the way Jews express themselves. There's a certain kind of pettiness that is the way the Jews express. And now, again, I'm Jewish. I can say that, and no one can be offended, or they can, but it's screw them. I own my experience. You know, I'm a storyteller, and I produce storytelling shows. And years ago, I did a show called Jews Lie, stories about lies within the Jewish community. And I got a lot of blowback from that because people thought I was being anti-Semitic. I'm like, no, I just really wanted to deal with the lies that Jews tell themselves, because I really feel that, you know, you can't really tell the story of a marginalized people unless you're willing to both deal with the good and the bad. And this is what happens when you start treating Jews as the other. The last thing I wanted to say, and unfortunately, it's not even relevant to the last sentence, is that America has such a whack concept of what a Jew is based on fake Hollywood that when I tell people I'm I'm a New Yorker, I'm a Jewish, and I'm a writer, they'll always say to me, I bet you write like Woody Allen or Neil Simon, as if Woody Allen and Neil Simon is the only kind of writer New York City or Judaism can produce. I was born 30 years after them. I grew up in a completely different environment and different time. I don't write about the Jewish experience. It's just not where my head is at. I mean, I wish I should be so lucky to have their money. But, the fact is people just pigeonhole you in that conceptual box because of the conceptual box. So part of this, I guess we have to ask, what is the solution about Jews playing Jews?
Right. You think the 1970s was a breakthrough for Jewish representation in movies?
It was because, again, that is when Neil Simon movies became big. His plays were around in the 60s, but his plays became bigger in the 70s. Same with Woody Allen. They did create opportunities for Jews. And you start seeing actors like Barbara Streisand, who's Jewish, playing real life Jews like Fanny Brice, who is Jewish. You have people like Elliot Gould, Dustin Hoffman, Goldie Hawn, Alan Arkin, Gene Wilder, Carol Kane in Hester Street. Hester Street's a great movie. It's just done its 50th anniversary, which is about a Jewish immigrant woman played by an attractive young lady and written by Joan Mencken Silver. You started seeing TV shows where Jews were being mainstream. Paul Michael Glazer played a Jewish cop named David Michael Starsky on Starsky and Hutch, and they at least said that Jews could be cops. Like that's all I got growing up in the 1970s. The only Jewish character I got, it wasn't like a lawyer or a doctor or an artist, who was just someone who could throw a punch and fire a gun, was Paul Michael Glazer. That's it, from Starsky and Hutch. Jewish men were allowed to play Jews, but on TV, not as much. Rhoda is played by Valerie Harper, a lovely woman, but not a Jew.
Chris, also came out in the 70s, I think, and I want to ask your opinion on it. What do you think about the Fiddler on the Roof, the success of Fiddler on the Roof?
Absolutely. Again, that provided, there were Jewish actors, including Paul Michael Glazer, thank you, and the lead, whose name Topol, is Jewish, and is not directed, believe it or not, it's directed by Norman Jewson, who's not Jewish. But you would think he would be. But it was written by Sheldon Harnick, by Jews. It's tough, right? Because it's great. It's very much dealing with the Jewish experience. It shows people what Judaism would like. It has Jews. It's quite lovely. So yeah, the 70s kind of at least allowed Hollywood to realize that people would watch a musical movie about Jews. People would watch movies about Jews. People would watch TV shows where Jews were cops.
I just want to,
yeah. Jews definitely came out of the closet more than anything on a national scale, I would argue, in the 1970s.
Okay, and I just want to add that I think the solution of Jews playing Jews is a good one, but I think like movies like Fiddler on the Roof and even the TV show Transparent, it's like the idea of you take a marginalized group and you let them play all the roles. You make it something set within that community. All the roles played by those people. I think it provides a better kind of level of representation and authenticity, because when you make a project where one of the characters is Jewish, shall we say, or one or two, like Shylock, okay, you end up the character, it becomes a question of what you're doing with that character. It's very easy to skew that character into some kind of weird stereotype, or even for the audience to think of it that way. I mean, it's not a good idea, right? I mean, stuff like Fiddler on the Roof, it's like it works a lot better for representation, wouldn't you say? So do you think Sarah Silverman is correct then in her argument? I mean, I'm sure we both do at this point, right?
Well, Sarah Silverman argues that Jews don't matter. Hollywood doesn't consider them a marginalized people, and that Hollywood is going to keep on taking people whose characters were very Jewish, like Joan Rivers and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who overcame adversity as Jews, and their stories are Jewish, and yet Jews won't have the opportunity to see their own hero played by their own people. And certainly, if you're going to make a movie about Malcolm X, you're not going to get, a white Parisian guy to play Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. So, we can see that why it's so wrong in any other ethnic group, but we can't see why it's wrong when you're talking about someone like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who did break ground not just for women, but for Jews. Same with Joan Rivers, why it's important to have those people played by Jews. And it's very sad. And you talk about authenticity, and I think, when you said authenticity, even though she doesn't use that word, I honestly think you nailed it even in a way that she didn't, which is there are times, I don't think she's 100% right in that, look, American Crime Story, which is produced by Ryan Murphy, who's not Jewish, to his credit, he's covering the Lewinsky Clinton scandal.
Mm-hmm.
And he cast Benny Feldstein, who is the sister of Jonah Hill, as Monica Lewinsky.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Benny Feldstein is a young Jewish girl from Los Angeles who's in her 20s, playing a young Jewish woman from Los Angeles in her 20s from 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I do think there's a lot of shorthand, and I think that there's a lot that she can bring to that performance because of that. What do you think, Randall? Does that illustrate what you're saying about authenticity?
Well, I think what I'm saying about authenticity is, you can have an actor play anybody, okay, but for a non-Jewish actor to play a Jewish character, they have a longer road to walk. They have to go a lot further in their approach. Yeah. When you have and also too, when I say authenticity, it's like there has to be a kernel of truth. In when you're making art, I feel like there has to be some kind of kernel of truth somewhere, some basis in fact. So when a non-Jew plays a Jew, it's like, sure, they can observe Jews and watch how Jewish people act and live and talk and everything and dress, but they will never truly really know what it's like to be Jewish and what it's like to live as a Jewish person. So they're just speculating.
Yeah, and I think other examples of what you're saying can be seen very recently, right? Last year, the movie The Trial of the Chicago 7 came out, and Sacha Baron Cohen was cast as Abby Hoffman. Not only are they both Jews, but Sacha Baron Cohen is an irreverent political trickster comic. Abby Hoffman was an irreverent trickster comic. A radical, true, but they both. I mean, if you look at the life of what Sacha Baron Cohen has done and what he'll be able, his understanding what Abby Hoffman is doing, not just in look, in tone, and temperament, it works really well, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, Cohen's great. Cohen's great in that role.
I mean, if you watch clips of the real Abby Hoffman and you see the clips of Cohen, they're identical.
Yeah, he's inhabited that character. He's done a great job.
It's brilliant. He spent like 10 years. He spent forever on. I know he spent originally this was going to be directed by Spielberg 10 years ago, and he watched he did 100 takes just to get it right. And he's always been attached, but it's great because there is a middle ground that he can meet him at. And I talked about Scarlett Johansson. She normally always plays Gentiles, but in Jojo Rabbit, she plays a Polish Jew, and she's great in it. And Adam Sandler, as I said before, in Uncut Gems, just leans into the world that he's from. He plays a contemporary Jewish man who's different than Adam Sandler, but certainly in a world that Adam Sandler knows, a certain kind of middle-class sensibility. And, Sacha Baron Cohen was nominated last year. The year before that, Scarlett Johansson and Adam Sandler were nominated. So these are people who were nominated for the Academy Award because they were able to find some kind of real, as you say, authenticity, right?
Yeah, and to say, Uncut Gems goes to the point of what I'm saying about having like the whole cast be Jewish, all the characters be Jewish. I mean, you have in Uncut Gems, Adam Sandler is free to play a not very nice person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he's surrounded by other Jewish characters and actors who can be different. Right? He's not forced to represent Jewish people with his one character, right?
Yeah, and that's the burden is off of him. I mean, the downside of this is it's been literally 20 years since Adrian Brody won an Academy Award for The Pianist, where he's a Jewish actor playing a real life Jewish pianist and composer, but that was 20 years ago. And no Jewish actor has won for playing a Jewish person in the last 20 years. And, even Sarah Silverman admits she's just doing a movie about her life, and she cast a Gentile to play her mom, but she assumed was Jewish based on previous work. And I think the solution is really both Jews and Gentiles are going to have to work together to make a conscious choice to cast Jewish actors and actresses as Jewish people. And that also means that A-list Jewish actors who I mentioned earlier, the Scarlett Johanssons, the Mila Kunises, the Andrew Garfields, the Daniel Radcliffes, they're going to have to stop being afraid of exposing their Jewishness on screen. Hollywood always needs to be held accountable when it comes to representation. And I do think, Randall, obviously, I want to be really clear. Representation of marginalized groups, yeah, I think there are many more groups who suffer more than Jewish people, Jewish actors, and Jewish stories, no doubt. I'm just saying that I can't make the argument because I chose my own community because I can speak to the Jewish experience. But clearly, I don't really feel comfortable speaking to another experience. But I know, you're Amerasian, right? You're Filipino on your dad's side, is that right?
I'm Filipino, Chinese, and Caucasian, yes.
Right. So I have never seen a single TV show or film about the Amerasian experience at all.
Well, it's tough being a mixed race person, Chris. I think Andrew Cunanan, who killed Versace, is like the only the only mixed race Amerasian person that's ever been depicted in media.
Who was played by Dean Cain, who was actually Amerasian.
And by the way, that miniseries, I can't remember the name of it. What is it? The Killing
American
of Versace?
Crime. I think that was American Crime Volume 2.
That is really good, by the way. It was really well done.
You guys have Dean Cain, who played Superman, which is awesome.
Right.
And you have Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves, yes. Well, they both pass, and they play leading men. So, and there's also The Rock. He's...
Oh, you're absolutely right. The Rock.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I don't think he's Caucasian. I don't know if he's Caucasian.
I didn't think he was. I thought he was a completely Asian Pacific Islander, but I could be wrong.
And I think he's Samoan. I think he's Samoan and black. I'm not sure, though. Wow. I have to look it up.
But, so for you, this must... I would turn the question to you. Comparatively speaking, I would be the first to admit as a Jew, I've had a much easier go. And by the way, I do want to stop for 1 second because I realize there's something inherently racist. I have been talking about the white Jewish experience, but there are so many biracial or just straight up black Jewish actors that no one talks about. Like Tiffany Haddish is Jewish. And then you have these great biracial actresses like Tracy Ellis Ross, Maya Rudolph, Rashida Jones. I'm forgetting one more, and I apologize. I wrote it down, and then I forgot. Maya Rudolph, Rashida Jones, Tracy Ellis Ross, Tiffany Haddish. You have, and I would love to see any of those women play Jewish people as they are Jews. And no one ever thinks of them as Jewish because they look at their skin color and they go, no, Jews have to be white. And not just white, but they can't be biracial. They have to be 100% white.
I am seeing, especially in TV commercials, more mixed race and mixed race families. I mean, it is getting interesting. I mean,
I have cousins who are biracial. I have cousins who are Amerasian. We're all Jews, and yet no one ever wants to talk about that experience at all.
it is interesting. I mean,
Drake too. I forgot Drake.
Hollywood has shied away from any kind of the entertainment industry shies away from any kind of mixed race kind of content. I mean, it seems like every entertainer has to be put into a box of some sort.
Have you ever seen Lenny Kravitz or Lisa Bonet ever play Jews, even though they're both Jews?
No, I don't think so.
Or Zoe Kravitz? I mean, we have all these Jewish actresses of color, and yet they're never allowed to embrace their Jewish nature, their Jewish heritage.
Well, Hollywood entertainment doesn't like entertainment likes simplicity, right? They put everybody into a box, and they don't like the ambiguity. I mean, I guess that's part of I don't know. That's part of what mainstream audiences like in entertainment.
Well, sometimes we have solutions. Sometimes we have a resolution. All I can say is I'm hoping that there'll be more accountability, and as we evolve as a society, there'll be greater representation for all marginalized groups.
Yeah, just all we need is more authenticity. I think you cast people, more match. You cast actors who match their characters as much as possible. I think is the solution, and and you maybe let the actors have some input. You diversify the writing room. I really do believe in diversity, Chris. I mean,
No, and I agree too. And I forgot to mention this, but like if people say, well, actors can play anything. That's true, but no matter what an actor plays, including Meryl Streep, they always bring their own unique sensibility to every role they play. And that's a good thing. An actor shouldn't give up what makes them specific. But you really, as I said before, it's not a question of talent. It's a question of exposure. So with that, that's all I got to say. Randall, you have anything else you'd like to add?
no, I think we covered it, Chris.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank Sarah Silverman for bringing this topic up. I have no idea if we'll ever meet or if you're a fan, but if you have, great. Until next time, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Talk to you later.
All right, bye.